there's a right way to go about comparing yourself to somebody and a wrong way as well. I'm going to give you the 6 rules of benchmarking that you should follow if you want to compare yourself to somebody like Brandon Sanderson without being depressed. Hey guys, it's Deborah, and today we are going to talk about benchmarking. When most people benchmark, they take their first draft of something they've just written and then they go off and compare it to the final published version of something by their favorite author. They end up super depressed because the two things are not even remotely comparable. And the second mistake that they're making here is they're comparing on outcomes instead of their process. Benchmark using KPIs, not goals. KPIs are a measure of something that you do. You therefore have control over it. Goals, on the other hand, represent outcomes that you want to achieve. If your KPIs aren't hitting the mark, then you can do something about it. And the other thing that's really cool about KPIs is you can use them to help you build consistent habits. Your KPIs should be specific and time-bound, just like your goals. If it's not specific, it's really not going to help you figure out what's working and what's not working, because it's like, well, it's just like also general, it could be anything. And the other reason for making it time-bound is so that you know what unit of time you are performing this activity over. Use the smallest unit of time that is practical. If you're going to benchmark yourself against Brandon Sanderson in terms of your writing output, it's really not helpful to use a year as a unit of time, because Brandon Sanderson writes something like between 300 to 400,000 words per year. That is his typical annual output. Of course, you're going to end up super depressed. That just feels impossible. But you break that 300,000 annual word count down to the smallest unit of time possible, let's say words per hour, and suddenly that doesn't seem so bad anymore, right? That feels like it's within the realms of possibility to improve your writing speed to the point where you are also writing 500 words per hour. I know that when I have a really low word count per hour, I'm actually trying to think of ideas on the spot. Like, that is the thing that slows me down. This might be different for you if you're a pantser, but I am an outliner for my Nano project last year. There were elements of my outline where I had not put enough thought into the outline before I started Nano. And so I kind of got to like chapter 4 and there was like one bullet point in my outline, which was they get to the capital city of the empire and it is a super cool city. So when I sat down to try and write chapter 4, I was a bit like, what's a cool city? I don't know. What makes a city really cool? And then I got to the end of the day and I was like, it's been 8 hours and I've done like 500 words. In contrast, for some of the other chapters where I had gone into a lot of detail about the exact beats that were going to happen in that chapter, the writing of those went super fast. I was doing like 2,000-3,000 words that day because I knew exactly where I was going to go with that scene, and all I had to focus on was just stringing the individual words together to describe what was happening in that moment. And so for me, that was a really easy technique to improve my word count per hour. Yeah, so that might work for most things, but you can't put KPIs on something like writing. I mean, it's art. No, controversial, but I'm gonna disagree. Art is created through a process, and if you go process, then there are things that you do as part of that process, and therefore you can create a KPI to measure that thing that you were doing in the process of creating art. If you disagree and you think you've got an example of something that you cannot put a KPI on, let me know in the comments, and I will do my best to see whether I can come up with a really good KPI for that. If you're sitting here and going, I don't know how to measure this KPI, chances are you haven't been specific enough. Even things that seem like they might be subjective and quite hard to quantify can actually be quantified. You just need to get a little bit creative with how you frame your KPI. In fact, you guys have probably come across some of these techniques before. On a scale of 1 to 10, like how would you rate your pain? Another example is sentiment analysis. And they kind of do this through a really interesting process where the algorithm associates certain words with positive emotions and certain words with negative emotions. And then they kind of like crunch through all of that data and they give you an overall sentiment analysis. You might be sitting there going, well, tracking my word count is all well and good, but it doesn't mean anything if I churn out like 100,000 word novel in a month and the whole novel just sucks, like it's a bad novel. Well, you can actually create KPIs around the quality of your writing as well. For example, if you know that plotting and structure is something that you need to work on, you could create a KPI around the number of positive feedback comments you receive from alpha or beta readers on your structure. Another example of a KPI you could create around that is the number of revisions sections or scenes that you had to delete or new scenes that you had to add in response to a structural problem with the book. And you can do very similar things with character arcs or world building or action scenes. And you can even get more detailed in terms of prose and line level stuff. Like you could set KPIs around the number of instances that you use passive voice versus active voice as an example. All of these things are examples of ways that you can quantify and set KPIs for good writing, which is, you know, the thing that people think, oh, like art is so subjective. You cannot possibly set KPIs around that. Yeah, you can. You can, guys. You can. And these things are not exactly perfect indicators because they are proxies for something that is quite difficult to quantify, but they are good enough from the perspective of a benchmarking exercise. All right, Deb, you've convinced me. KPIs are awesome. I'm going to set KPIs for everything. Whoa, okay, stop. You should only set KPIs for the things that are going to move the needle for you towards your goals. Once you get your head around KPIs and how they work and how to construct a really good KPI, it's really tempting to make a KPI for everything because you literally could. You can make like 100 KPIs for your whole self-publishing process. That would be a terrible idea because nobody can keep 100 KPIs in their heads. And that's why things like daily word count or number of words per hour is such a popular KPI, because the one thing that you absolutely have to do, you need to finish your manuscript. I don't suggest having it as your only KPI. I like to have 3 because it makes sure that I'm being really balanced across my entire process. You can have more if you feel the need to, but I would not suggest going more than 5. If I have 3 KPIs, I'm only really splitting my focus 3 ways. But if I'm trying to track 10 KPIs, I'm splitting my focus 10 ways, and it's just going to be super overwhelming. Not to mention the fact that you're going to be spending all of this time tracking your activities on all of these KPIs, which is not going to leave you much time to actually execute. All right, I get it. What's next? When you're setting your benchmark, it's really important that you don't set yourself up to fail. Once you've got your 3 to 5 KPIs, which are specific, measurable, time-bound, and relevant to your goals, the last part is to actually set a benchmark for each of those KPIs. There's only really 2 kinds of sources for benchmarking data. Usually when you're benchmarking against other people, you're going to be relying on publicly available information. If you're benchmarking against yourself, then you're really going to be drawing on your personal experience. And hopefully you've kept some sort of records in the past and that'll be your starting point. But if you haven't, that's okay. You can just make a guess as to what you think that activity is going to look like realistically. When should you benchmark against somebody else and when should you benchmark against yourself? If you're just starting out and you are very new to writing prose and you have never finished a novel before, then you're probably going to want to start out setting a benchmark relative to yourself. You may want to apply the method that James Clear popularized here, which is the 1% incremental daily improvement method, just so that you can kind of really push yourself to continually be improving the number of words that you're writing per hour. If you're not new at this and you're comfortable writing prose and you really want to push yourself to improve your output per hour, then you might want to look at benchmarking yourself against a top performer or against a peer group. You might want to take something like Brandon Sanderson's word count per hour and then just kind of apply an adjustment factor so that it's going to be achievable for you. That's a pretty big increase in the number of words that I'm outputting per hour, so I'm going to have to kind of really push myself to get there. But 400 per hour feels achievable if I'm already at 300 words per hour. If I try to go straight for 500 words per hour here, I actually might be biting off more than I can chew. If I go really well and I'm consistently hitting 400 words per hour, that's when I might want to move my benchmark and start trying to go for 500 words per hour. Interestingly enough, when you are a top performer in your field, the most relevant way to set your benchmarks is probably not against somebody else either. It's going to be against yourself, because what you're going to be doing at that point is continually pushing yourself to improve from where you currently are. And you can see there's been instances in the past where he has done this. And so that's an example of a top performer really pushing themselves by setting that KPI a little bit higher so that they can get to their goal. Finally, you have to remember to track it. When I say track it, I just mean write it down somewhere. Any method will do. You can write it down in a notepad if you are old school, or you can put it in a spreadsheet if you're like me and you just hate paper. Don't overcomplicate it. The more complicated you make it, the less of a chance that you are actually going to track it, unless you have some sort of automated system for tracking this, in which case I want to hear from you. I want to hear how you are automating your tracking of your KPIs. If you're missing a couple of days or you forgot to track a couple of instances, don't freak out, don't stop, just keep tracking it, because any data is better than no data. A few missing data points isn't really going to matter, because you want a lot of data points so that you can look at it and see if there is some sort of trend over time. The fact that you've got these data points right in front of you means you can really objectively look at them and analyze your performance to figure out what's working and what's not. You'll start noticing patterns of when you're writing better, when the words are flowing more easily, when you're able to get into the flow of things. For example, you might notice that every week on Fridays when you write, you just manage to pump out more words per minute. You can actually then sit back and think about, well, what is it that I'm doing differently on Fridays? And just by noticing these things, you'll be able to adapt your writing process in order to maximize the conditions under which you are writing the best and minimize the conditions that are not going to be helpful to you in writing. And if you're doing this with KPIs across your whole self-publishing process, you're going to be able to start optimizing that process so that it really, really is going to work for you. That's all going to help you publish books more frequently and consistently. And this is why whenever people tell me that, like, oh, you can't put KPIs on art, I'm like, well, no wonder that you're not actually delivering on anything. Track your KPIs. If you found that useful, please give it a like, and I would love to hear about what your KPIs are in the comments. If you're sitting there and you're still struggling with coming up with some really good KPIs, let me know in the comments too, and I will see if I can help you out there. Don't forget to subscribe and to hit the bell so that you can be notified whenever I post more videos like this on the business side of self-publishing. See you guys in the comments.